Hi there. My name is Dave Seaweed. I'm the Indigenous Coordinator at Douglas College. I'm Kwakiutl, born and raised in East Vancouver. I would like to acknowledge that I'm sharing with you today on the Kakite First Nation, the newest Minster Band, and thank Chief Rhonda Larrabee for supporting our work here. As is my understanding, the word Vancouver Festival is spread throughout the Lower Mainland, and so would also like to acknowledge Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, Squamish, Coquitlam nations. We acknowledge that we are on the unceded traditional territories of the Coast Salish people, where we live, we learn, we play, and we do our work.
Hi, I'm Bonnie Nish, Executive Director of Work Vancouver. I'd like to welcome you to this year's festival. We are so excited by the programming. We hope you enjoy yourself. I also want to thank our whole team, our board, all our sponsors and partners, and all of the supporters. Enjoy.
Hello, welcome to Word Vancouver. My name is Todd Wong. I'm your host for this event, which is After the Beginning Comes the End. And we're talking about Asian Canadian literature and how, we had some incredible writers, Paul Yee, Wei-Sun Choi, Denise Chong, Sky Lee, Joy Kagawa. But afterwards, there was the next step. What happens when we no longer write about the Asian Canadian story? We get Madeleine Thien, who won the Giller Prize and the Governor General's Literary Award. We have Rita Wong, incredible poet. But today we have Madeleine. We have Jamie Liew, who's the newest recipient of the Asian Canadian Writers Workshop Jim Wong-Chu Award. And we have Shin, a filmmaker who is now writing her first novel. Actually, writing her second novel, and she's got the first novel already published. And we're going to hear from each of those three writers in just a moment. But right now, we are going to watch a video about the Asian Canadian Writers Workshop, one of the founders, Jim Wong-Chu, and how he developed this award called the Emerging Writers Award to fill that void when there weren't really any Asian Canadian writers.
About 10 years ago, we created what we call the Emerging Writer Award. And at that time, there wasn't a lot of writers getting published, Asian writers getting published. And every season, there was a fall season, a spring season, we thought, and we would anticipate to see if there was an Asian writer at all. And we'd cheer if there was one or maybe two. And so one of our directors said, Jim, at least try to guarantee one writer a year. So that's when we created the Emerging Writer Award. Emerging Writer Award is unique because it was a solution to a problem. It was not to give an award for somebody who published a book and that they're the best one to publish. We were using it as a vehicle to attract manuscripts. And so the best manuscript is the one that we choose. We give it a name, we give it the award, and help them get a jump start on their writing career. However, the other ones that are mature and reasonably good, we will work with them also to try to get them published. Because our main aim is to get as many people published as possible. So sometimes you can't leave things to chance. You have to find a way to do that.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Ellen Cho. I'm the Executive Director of the Asian Canadian Writers Workshop. On behalf of ACWW, it's my pleasure to announce tonight's winner of the Jim Wong-Chu Emerging Writers Award. But before I do, I want to take a moment to thank our adjudication committee members who spent countless hours deliberating, reading, and rereading the many manuscripts that came in. I want to thank Marlene Enns, who is a manuscript consultant and the wife of the late Jim Wong-Chu. I want to thank Edwin Lee, who is a writer and author of Some Young Guys in Chinatown. And also want to thank Dr. Trevor Carolyn, who is a professor emeritus of English at the University of the Fraser Valley. Thank you, committee members. And here's our moment of truth, where I'm going to announce the winner and also the runner-ups as well of the award. The second runner-up of the Jim Wong-Chu Emerging Writers Award is Jenny Lee, Austria, for Reunification Stories, for caregivers and the ones who love them. Congratulations, Jenny. The first runner-up is Wiley Wei-Chen Ho for her manuscript, The Sticky Rice and Grilled Cheese, Tales from a Taiwanese-Canadian Astronaut Family. Congratulations, Wiley. And the winner of this year's Jim Wong-Chu Emerging Writers Award is Jinwoo Park for his manuscript, The Oxford Soju Club, which is a tale of mystery and intrigue, CIA agents, false identities, betrayal and love, each character committed to their own cause, a nail-biter to the very end. Congratulations, Jinwoo, for this amazing manuscript. I also want to take some time to also thank all of our writers who submitted manuscripts and the ACWW for offering this award in Jim's name. Jim Wong-Chu truly believed that through the telling of our stories, we can come together with a better understanding and respect for each other. Over the many years, ACWW has helped nurture a generation of writers of Asian Canadian descent. Congratulations to all writers, and I want to thank everyone for tonight's event. Over to you, Todd.
Hi. Thanks, Alan. What a wonderful introduction. And part of it is, I think, not only has Asian Canadian Writers Workshop nurtured one generation, but they've nurtured two generations. And now it's getting on to three generations with these brand new writers. We've seen Madeleine Thien go from an editor at Rice Paper Magazine to winning the major awards in Canada. We've seen Catherine Hernandez, who won the award a number of years ago, publish this incredible book called Scarborough, and it's about BIPOC gender diversity. And Catherine is reading on other programs for Word Vancouver. So Asian Can Lit has changed so much since Joy Kagawa, Wei Sin Choi, Denise Chong, Paul Yee, etc. And now it's global issues, because Madeleine's first book, Simple Recipes, was about life in Vancouver, and then she went to, I think, Cambodia with Dogs on the Perimeter, and things we cannot say. It goes back and forth between China and Vancouver, and there is so much there. So, Madeleine, what do you think inspired you? How did you learn about the Asian Canadian Writers Workshop Award? And I think I remember that time when they first announced you in a dinner for ACWW with Glenn Deere.
Yes, it's great to see you, Todd, and I can't wait to see everyone else when we are all on the screen. But and also just congratulations to Jinwoo Park. That was so exciting to watch that announcement. I got a bit emotional. I mean, it's amazing that 20 years for me since when I won it can pass in the blink of an eye. So, Todd, what did you ask me?
What was it like winning that first award? Who were your literary heroes at that time? So let's go there.
Yeah, I had read, Wei Sin Choi, Sky Lee, Paul Yee. I'd read Jim's poetry. I didn't know where I fit. I think I was still trying to understand, the craft first and foremost, and then trying to figure out a way to have the stories make sense of the Vancouver that I knew at that moment in time, which was different from the Vancouver that I saw through their eyes. And I think one of the biggest inspirations for me was when Joy Kugawa was a writer in residence when I was an undergraduate student at UBC. And she read Simple Recipes, a very messy early draft of Simple Recipes. And I remember we didn't talk that much the whole meeting, but she held my hand and she said, "You don't have to worry. You're going to be published." And yeah, I can't even sort of quantify what that meant for me at that time, because I felt like I was moving into I just couldn't see it. I had no idea, yeah.
Yes, I remember going to the Word Vancouver Festival. I think we were on the street at that time, and talking to the people who were representing your publisher, and they were so excited to have your book. And initially, the award was to help give money incentive to the publisher, and they thought your book was so good. They didn't. I don't think they even took the money.
No.
Yeah, they were. So they saw that potential that you had and the wonderful book that you wrote. So part of it is, what do you see now happening in Asian CanLit? Because yes, it's a different landscape.
A different landscape.
Before, and it's really neat to see what Jamie and Anne who will be talking later, and Jinwoo Park will be doing.
Yes, it's very exciting. I mean, I think every era, every generation has to figure out its own way in some degree. Something of what those who have come before, we who have come before, we didn't have to answer certain questions that they have to answer now, or they weren't at the forefront of the conversation. Something that really jumped out at me in the video was when Jim says, at least let's try to guarantee at least one Asian Canadian writer getting published a year. And that is so shocking to hear at this moment in time when there's such a flourishing, but it is true at that point in time, just how few opportunities it seemed that there were. So I'm excited about the future. I feel like they have a lot to teach us. Mm-hmm. And I'm really excited to hear them.
Yes, I'm looking forward to you coming back to Vancouver, because I know you have branched out into so many things. And I remember when we first met, I was so excited just to see A Chinese Violin, which was your children's book that was turned into a video. Hear that, Anne?
The other way around.
The other way around. Okay.
National Film Board. Yes.
Right. But now you've written the libretto to an opera that's going to be performed in Vancouver soon. And you're working on a new book. So you've got a reading, and tell us what you're working on, and please give us a reading.
Sure. Working on the opera. It'll open next September at Vancouver Playhouse. It's been incredible working with the composer, Alice Ho, and Paul Yee, one of my great heroes, who's been doing the Hoisanese translation, but also reimagining of certain parts of the libretto. And that has been incredible. And I'm working on a totally impossible novel that's too big and too much, but I'm hoping to pull it together in the next year.
Oh, that sounds great.
But I'm actually reading from Simple Recipes. Is that okay?
Oh.
Very briefly. Yeah, I went by the title actually after the end came the beginning. So I'm actually just going to read the last 2 pages of Simple Recipes. All right. When my father became conscious finally, he was frightened. "You must leave now," he mumbled. "Hurry, call the police." A side effect, the doctor told me. The drugs were making him fearful. When I stood at his bedside, he grasped my hand and said, "Did you call the police?" And I said, "Yes." Anything seemed possible. My father lost himself in wild imaginings that none of us were privy to. My father said, "There's been a mistake." "Yes," I told him. "I'll straighten it out." He muttered in Indonesian, "Apakah Anda pasti?" And I answered, "No, I am not certain at all." In the nights that followed, I slept on a chair beside my father's bed. I woke up to the night sky, its flood of stars, and remembered the 3 of us traversing the empty roads on our Sunday drives, those tunnels and arteries. It used to be that we could lose ourselves in them before we came to know the city well. Each morning, my mother arrived with a cup of coffee in one hand, the newspaper in the other. She took the chair that I vacated and read to my father for a short while. Slowly, my father came back to the world, his eyes open and full. I watched from outside the room, knowing this moment would pass, but I drank it in to see them side by side. Last Sunday, I drove out to Hastings Street and the neighborhood where I grew up. I looked for the old store, but the glass storefronts had changed too much. I had thought that what was so vivid in my imagination would call out to me in real life, as if in verification. Will, in the passenger seat, said perhaps the building had been torn down long ago to make way for something else, a different building, a new development. He was right, I knew. But still, I thought I should recognize the place. We got out of the car and walked along the sidewalk. It was fall and the leaves had come down. The branches were stark and lovely. Near to us on the sidewalk, a little boy in a blue raincoat ran headlong through the crowd of people. We could not see where he was headed, only that his arms were stretched out to both sides like an airplane. I thought that someone would eventually catch him, his feet swinging off the ground, and lift him high. They would give him an aerial view of the street, these stores, all the people crowding along. On the hill, the cars struggled up the incline, halting and nervous, and the street lamps began to burn. The little boy disappeared ahead of us into the crowd. I knew then that I would not find it, but still I walked in the direction he had gone, at home in this place, though every landmark had disappeared. The end.
Wow. Thank you, Madeleine. And just before we move on, I want to ask you one more question. How did Jim's work in ACWW inspire or make you feel?
You know, I appreciate it more and more and more as the years go by. I was so young when I first met him, and he opened all these doors. He wanted me to like be involved, you know, edit, be part of the community, make connections, make bonds and friendships. And so he brought me into rice paper. I was just pulling out Chinatown Ghosts, you know.
Oh, Jim's novel, or I mean poetry book, yes.
Yeah, and the photographs. I don't think we really even have enough ways to thank him for what he did. And I think with every passing year, it becomes more apparent how much he put in motion that frankly might never have been set in motion hadn't been for his incredible diligence. He just never stopped. He was always on it, always looking for new talent, always bringing in new people.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you, Madeleine. We'll hear back from you in a bit. And now we're going to go to Shin, who is an incredible award-winning filmmaker. But the first time I met her, I didn't know anything really about Anne, except you were at Literasian Festival, which Jim came up with as an idea on celebrating Asian Canadian literature. And you had your poetry book called The Family China. And now you've got your new novel called The Exiles.
The Last Exiles.
Oh, sorry, The Last Exile.
Yeah.
And I saw that at the library. I work at the Vancouver Public Library, and I was excited to see it and started reading it, and I'm just drawn in. But I've been having to host other Word Vancouver exhibit things, and I haven't quite finished it yet. So don't tell me the ending.
Don't.
So tell us, what was the landscape like for you, for your literary heroes?
Sure. First, I wanted to just thank Madeleine for that beautiful reading. It's always such a dream to hear her read her work. So that was wonderful. And I can't wait to hear more about the ACWW winner and the runners-up too later this festival or maybe even today. ACWW and Jim Wong-Chu was a real like a beacon at a time when there wasn't really, when I was in my 20s and trying to get my writing out there, there was just no sense of kind of like a community or scene for Asian writers in Toronto, but in Vancouver, Jim Wong-Chu is such a tour de force and created such a great community with the events and the support systems he created, and Rice Paper magazine, which Madeleine was editor at too, where we got a sense of what it's like for our voices as Asian Canadian writers to be next to one another in the magazine or up on stage, and to understand that we're all a community. So that was really like marrow in the bone. It was so essential, and so I thank you all for it, even now today, and this opportunity. It's wonderful to be here. So ACWW is like, it's wonderful to be part of your stable of people that you've helped throughout these years.
It was really neat to see you and meet you, and to have some of the writers get together and then start chatting
Yes.
to each other, because
Yeah.
they came from across the country.
Yeah, yeah,
And
exactly.
we've got some of those great group pictures with everybody. And then
Yes.
there was a big dinner
Yeah.
afterwards.
Yeah, I love that. It was. I remember one of them. It was a Chinese. It was at a Chinese restaurant. It's just great. Everyone sitting around. You know, the big tables. It was lovely.
So, what do you see happening in the Asian Canadian literature landscape now?
I think it's really interesting in that I think everyone is. We're not just telling our own our histories from, you know, our parents' generation, those of us who are children of immigrant parents or who were brought here at a young age. So the landscape we grew up with is Canadian. So I think that there's a multiplicity of stories being told now, urban, as you mentioned earlier, like themes about gender and sexuality, and it's not just about immigrant histories. Of course, I think all those stories. It's great to be able to tell them, and to be at a time in history where we have the freedom to be able to say, this is the story that's most important to me, and to work on that, no matter what theme it might be.
It's interesting reading your new book, because there's kind of a love story in there that is sort of denied or hidden, and then it comes out, and maybe it takes different directions. I've just gotten a copy of The Defector, which was your movie about people who were escaping North Korea.
Yes.
So there are some tie-ins between your film and your new novel.
Yes. When I was doing research for the novel, I ended up meeting a lot of North Korean defectors in Canada, and they are networked with people across Asia who are helping defectors escape. So I ended up going to the border of North Korea and China in my research and following defectors as they're escaping, and I realized, like, there's a documentary story here too. These people's stories should be told as their own stories as well in documentary form. So I ended up filming a documentary, but all that experience that I had, whether I was, riding the trains with them, afraid of getting caught, or, having a bowl of noodle soup with them in a safe house, all these experiences were something that I carried in my body and really helped me when I was working on the book, The Last Exiles, which is a work of fiction, but those real experiences helped flesh out the scenes that I was writing in the book.
Wow, I really want to hear from it, but I'm sort of getting chills, because I'm thinking, when I was reading Jan Wong's books about China blues and her experiences in China,
yes.
After the Cultural Revolution and things like that. So yes, do you have something to read for us?
Sure, yes, yeah. So I'll read from The Last Exiles. What happens in this book is Jin, who's a promising scholarship student, kind of realizing that dream that lots of Asian and other ethnic parents hope for their kids. He's starting to see his success, but he does something for the sake of his family that gets him in trouble. And his girlfriend, Suja, sees these bruises on his face that were the result of an altercation with a police officer. And so she doesn't know what happened yet, and she wants to find out what happened. And they're in the dark room together, processing photos. Suja dropped another print into the stop bath and waited for him to continue. She was expecting Jim to tell her what happened in Ganggi, but in the extended pause, the mood in the room shifted. Suja, if anything should happen to me, nothing will, but if one day something should happen. She turned slowly to look at him. Something happened, didn't it? I just wanted to say, you should know that the most important person in my life is in this room with me right now. He put his hand on hers. Suja's face glowed in the red luminescent light. He wanted to take her in his arms and wrap himself around her and lose himself in the depths of her eyes, tell her everything. What happened? She whispered. Jin weighed the moment. They were alone in this dark room, safe. If there was a time he could tell her, it would be now, here. But then he thought about the possible consequences if he told her the chain of events that could unfold if she were to one day be interrogated, and the different outcomes that could transpire between them and between each of them in this state. Nothing, he said, nothing happened. Don't lie. He shook his head. Suzhou was quiet. There were things you didn't speak about among friends or even within your own family. You learned to devote them into the darkness and carry them within you silently, pushing them down, making them smaller and darker still. The fabric of life in North Korea was riddled with dark holes, and yet somehow it held together. I have another section I could read, or I could stop there as well.
No, go ahead.
Okay. So Jin gets caught, and the state forces Jin's father to punish him publicly. And so Jin's father is in this very difficult position where he has to punish his son physically. Not like that, the officer barked. He thinks he's scolding a baby, he jeered. Beat him properly, old man, or we'll do it for you. Mr. Park, Jin's father, wiped a trail of spittle off his chin. He was already hitting Jin as hard as he could. What more could he do? Did he have to beat his own son to death? Still, if there was a way to spare his son greater punishment at the hands of the soldiers, he would do it. By the everlasting leader, he would yell viciously, make the belt crack, do everything he could to convince the guards that Jin was getting the punishment he deserved. Stand up, he yelled in a hoarse voice, the tendon in his neck standing out. Jin struggled to get up, and as he straightened, his father whipped the back of his legs until his hamstrings screamed with sensation. He collapsed to his knees, then willed himself up again. Somehow his quaking body responded. He felt his consciousness slip into a chasm between here and somewhere very far away. Get up on your feet, Mr. Park's voice was thick with emotion. He was desperate for his son to stand up so he could avoid hitting his shoulders or his head. Up, damn you, up! You call that a beating, old man? The officer yelled. You've forgotten how to hit. He picked up a truncheon and raised it at Mr. Park, who flinched. Mr. Park doubled his efforts. The tendons in his neck stretched taut as he slung the belt, his eyes gone wild. Jin was nearly doubled over as the blows hit him across the shoulders, his back, and the soldiers goading his father on. The world was closing in around him in this dark frenzy. Jin shut his mind down, closing himself off until he was no longer inside his body, but he was a tightly clenched fist, a dark smudge of space inside that fist, an irreducible point of pain. Look at that bastard, said the sergeant. Look at him. Jin raised his eyes to watch his father, whose pants had unraveled and hung low on his hips, his hair disheveled, eyes red with exertion. Look at your son, the sergeant barked. Mr. Park could not meet Jin's eyes. The officer leered at Jin. All right, old man, we're going to finish off what you began. He pushed Mr. Park aside and grabbed a length of pipe and brought it down, crashing onto Jin's back. The other soldiers jumped in with their heels, their pipes, their fists, their boots. So many of them crowding around trying to get their kicks in. Jin's sister fell into a soundless screaming fit, her hands mashed against her mouth to prevent herself from making a sound, while Jin's mother collapsed into shuddering convulsions. Mr. Park stood off to the side, watching the soldiers as tears streamed down his cheeks. They were beating his son to death before his eyes. He had allowed this. I have to assure you, Jin doesn't die. He goes on.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. I was just sitting on the edge of my seat here going, oh no.
Yeah.
Okay, Jamie, you have to follow that. But I just wanted to say that earlier when Madeleine announced thanks Jinwoo Park. I mean, for our newest recipient for the Asian Canadian Writers Workshop Award, the diversity that we were initially Asian Canada was Asian, Chinese Canadian, Japanese Canadian, but really expanding Korean Canadian, Vietnamese Canadian with Philip Hun, who's Forbidden Purple City, I think, won at the same time as Catherine Hernandez, who's writing queer Asian brown fiction. And that's all amazing to hear these stories from around the world becoming part of Asian Can Lit and part of Canadian literature really is really important. So thank you, Anne.
Thank you.
Jamie. Jamie, what do you have for us? So I first met you at the historic Joy Kagawa House. And we knew that you're the incoming winner, and your book, or is it poetry, called Dandelion?
It's a novel, yes.
Sorry, I'm just so excited about reading and hearing everything and keeping my notes in my head. So you have the novel, and I learned that you were a human rights lawyer. That's right.
Yes.
And we talked a little bit about that. So very exciting to hear. So what influenced you to write and to tell these stories?
I've always wanted to be a writer, and just didn't have, I guess, the I guess I hadn't tried it before, and I had a very privileged career as an academic alongside my legal career, and I had a sabbatical one year, and I was quite burnt out from both being a lawyer and the academic research and writing, and I took 3 months to kind of just see if I could do it, and I can say that while writing is a very hard endeavor, there's moments of joy and moments of extreme satisfaction in working on a project like this, which I know many writers can relate to. So I could just say that it was just something I think I always wanted to do. And like you said, there's just a diversity of stories out there that can and should be told. And I felt like there wasn't a story that there was an elements of some stories, parts of my story that haven't been told that I was wanting to share.
Oh, great. Thank you. So who inspires you for writing? What inspired you in Asian Canadian literature, and who do you see, or what inspires you now?
To be honest with you, I really would love to pay homage to just Anne and Madeleine, who are here. It's an honor to honestly, it's really a dream to just be on a panel with these two amazing writers. And to just say that I know that my place here in Canadian literature is one that's built upon many Asian Canadian writers. And to be honest, my path towards ACWW was one built on community. ACWW is, it has national reach. And I can say this honestly, I didn't know about ACWW until I walked into an event that was being held at Shanghai Restaurant here in Ottawa. And I was talking to the owner of Shanghai Restaurant, a friend of mine, Don Kwan, and he said, "You need to meet Robert Yip. He knows everybody you can possibly know." And just in a passing conversation with him, I had not told many people about this, but I just kind of just softly revealed to him, "Oh yeah, I'm in the middle of writing a novel right now." And he's like, "Really?" And then later on in the conversation, I said, "Oh, I'm going to Toronto for an immigration law conference." And he said, "Well, you know what, you need to meet Paul Yee and Wei Sin Choi." And I said, "Excuse me?" He's like, "Yeah, I can hook you up." So, the community that Jim Wong-Chu and the ACW have built is Wei Sin Choi. And it was during that conversation that I learned about the Jim Wong-Chu Emerging Writers Award. And then I pulled out my phone and looked it up, and I was like, "Oh, the contest closes in 2 weeks. So I better get something in before then." So I can honestly say that it was like a little bit of fate, that I walked into a Chinese restaurant in Ottawa, spoke to a few people, went to Toronto, had some dim sum with two amazing and storied authors, and it led to the path that I'm on today. So it's a really amazing story.
Excellent. And I hope that we can have you at the historic Joy Kagawa House as a writer in residence. If you need a summer vacation in Vancouver, Okay.
I would love to come to Vancouver.
So do that, apply for that as a residence. And part of it is, for me, getting to know Jim over the many, many, many years, before, gosh, what was happening? 1986, I really got to know Paul Yee because he had created the Saltwater City exhibit. And that really helped inspire me getting to know about Asian Canadian history. And because I knew about it, I jumped at the chance to help save Joy Kogawa's childhood home and then become the founding president for the historic Joy Kogawa House Society. And we've almost had Madeleine come out, but at one point we will again. And Jamie, I'd love to have you come out and be part of the Literation Festival when Alan organizes that.
It would be an honor. I mean, this is my debut novel. It's coming out in the spring, in April 2022. So it, folds in nicely to the timing of Literation. So I would love to.
Yes, May is a wonderful time to be in Vancouver. So Dandelion, do you have something to read for us?
Yes, thank you. I first also just want to congratulate this year's winner, Jinwoo Park. I still remember the thrilling moment of finding out the news. So just congratulations, and congratulations to the runner-ups as well. It was the spring of 1987. I was 11 years old. My father's sister, Auntie Chunyu, placed satay sticks on the barbecue. She shot a dirty look at Mother. Auntie often referred to Mother as Father's light-skinned child bride. She would tell her to stop playing and start cooking. Mother would roll her eyes behind Auntie's back, and we would laugh at her. That day, Mother hopped off the swing to run towards the barbecue to help Auntie prepare dinner. Auntie Chunyu didn't live with us anymore, but she came over every weekend to cook dinner and complained that Mother didn't cook the way Father liked. It stung Auntie Chunyu that we lived in the Heights. She and Uncle Stephen had bought a small bungalow near downtown Sparwood, a more modest space. She came weekly, hoping her presence in Sparwood Heights would elevate her status. I asked Mother why Auntie needed more status when she was already tall, broad, and sturdy. Mother replied that status was more than just physicality, and that Auntie was seeking something outside of her being, that she wanted to appear rich, powerful, and all-knowing. On the weekends, Auntie Chunyu wore her kabaya. Her weekend wear was a badge she wore proudly. She always reminded Bea and me that we are Nonya, Straits-born Chinese, not like those from the mainland. I ran over to Auntie Chunyu. While she prayed on Mother, she was my elder, and I carried a fascination with her. The oldest of Father's siblings, she loved to lecture, correct, and order Mother around, but not me. Auntie would let me hover, but if I inched too close to rest my hand on her, she would pull away as if she was afraid to catch something. Mother let Auntie take charge of dinner. She sat at the picnic table, rubbing her ankle. She could be found tracing her fingers around her ankle bones on both sides of her foot any time of day. Mother told me it was because she had injured it as a teenager, and it was never the same after. The massaging of her foot made it feel better, she told me, but I think it also became so habitual she didn't realize she was doing it sometimes. She was stroking it more when she was stressed, anxious, or upset about something. Auntie Chunyu must have been especially unnerving that day. The spring sun must have brought Auntie some warmth. She taught me how to make satay. The secret, she said, was to allow the nutty spices to marinate, making space for each other. Later, when Mother saw me put my hands in the bowl, she bellowed, "Lily, stop sticking your fingers in the bowl." Auntie Chunyu scolded my mother. "Ayo, no need to yell at her. She's learning how to make satay from the best." I could see Mother was seething, but she held her tongue. She told me if she talked back, the sting of the verbal nettles coming from Auntie would fester into a sore that would get infected. I watched as Mother, like a dutiful servant, set the table. Auntie Chunyu reminded me to leave some space at the table for those who could not join us, especially her son, my cousin, Winston. He was the only missing guest. He chose not to come to Canada despite Auntie Chunyu's efforts. He was the only person that seemed to defy Auntie Chunyu, and now she talked of Winston as if he was dead. Mother privately described Auntie Chunyu's eulogies as if she was kaupe kaupu, crying about dead parents. Auntie Chunyu talked about Winston that spring day. "Aya, Jin House, so young and yet a life already wasted." Her husband, Uncle Stephen, sighed. "Gao Yao, enough already." Uncle growled at Uncle Stephen. "You've given up on your only son so easily. If you were a good father, he would be here. He would not be stateless. He would be Canadian." "Chunyu," Mother said. He's got permanent residence in Brunei. He's not without. You should be proud of him. He's started his own business. He's not living in a longhouse with the Iban. Auntie Chunu scoffed, surprised that my mother would dare challenge her. He might as well be with the orangutans in the Temburong on the Brunei River. How can you think he has a future when he's nobody? Chunu, at least you know we are safe in Canada, Uncle Stephen reminded his wife. Thanks to Aloy's foresight to sponsor us all, we're not without status. Auntie Chunu turned to father. Yes, Aloy is a dutiful brother, but what good is it for us to be here if my son is languishing at home? It's never too late, father said. You should come and talk to Winston, put some sense into him. Mother laughed. Time will tell if there's any sense in moving here. What would Winston do here? Work in the mine with you? He's running his own business back home, driving a nice car, living in a nice house, being cleaned by an ama. He's his own boss. Auntie Chunu shot a dirty look at Mother. I rarely saw Mother debate with Auntie, but whenever there was an opportunity to promote a trip back home, Mother would take the risk. You envy Winston, sweetheart, Father said, but his life is built on a house of cards. He relies on a Malay to have his business. His name is not even on the ownership papers. Everything he's built can be taken away. One day, a forceful wind will come and take everything. No amount of wind will help him crawl from under the rubble and rebuild. There may be no place to rebuild, because how can you call a place your home when you're nothing? They don't recognize you. They don't look at you. They can discard you and kick you out. Winston, like all of us stateless people, are expendable, and I don't want to wait for the day when my life and the lives of my children come crashing down. I'm sorry, Chunu, but you do have reason to worry. If I was his father, I'd drag him out of that jungle and bring him here. Mother chimed in again. Here, yes, you have status, but nothing else. We live in a valley, you work underground. Our children are away for so much family. Think about the Assam fish. Think about how you don't fear the cold. Think about how green everything is. Think about how pungent the durian is. Even Auntie Chunu nodded slightly. I can see why Winston chose to stay where he is, Mother said. Let me ask all of you, what's holding us back? We have citizenship now. We can go home. Home? Father said. How can you call that place home? Why would I leave a place that has welcomed me and my children to go to a place where people look at us like shit floating down the stilt houses of Kampong Ayer? You can't even have a beer without the state taking that away too. You can have all the Te Tariq and Chendal in the world, Auntie added. But Aloy's right. We would always hunger for more. The sweetness the food brings to our lives would be a distraction from the worry that we would be kicked out. Even the heat is tiring there. Then we can come back to Canada, said Mother. I don't want the yo-yo life, said Auntie. It's not right, Father added. We chose this place, and it chose us. There's no betrayal in wanting to go home. It wasn't home, Father said. You're fooling yourself if you think this is home, Aloy. You're both wrong, Auntie Chunu said. It's not as if we've forgotten where we've come from, but Aloy's right. We do not belong back home. As long as we are together, we can remember. We'll always find home. We can't forget who we are.
Oh, thank you. I want to have a Literasian festival with food now.
Yeah.
And that's something that really brings us all together. And Anne, you were talking about that. And Madeleine, I think Simple Recipes has some stories about food there. And I know Alan Cho wanted to have something to do with maybe having a takeout dinner that people can order some of Jim Wong-Chu's favorite meals and things like that. And then we can sit and watch each other on screen and eat the meals together and describe them. I've seen that happen during the COVID time because we can't get together.
Do a lot of ASMR.
That sounds good, yes. Okay, so where do we go next? Part of it is I want to, again, thank the winners and the runners-up because, in the tradition that Jim created, it's not just the person who won the award that got published. And he would also shop around all the stories that came through when people would write. So I know that we are all winners and there is all community here. So what I want to do now is ask, let's start with Madeleine. Do you have a question for Jamie or Anne? And then Anne can ask questions. And then Jamie, you get to ask a question.
Oh, wow. Okay, on the spot, but that's exciting. First, I just want to say how much I love the readings. Oh my gosh. I mean, and that our voices are also distinct and different, and the kind of broad questions we're taking on. They're so separate, but there was a lot of interfolding. And Jamie, I mean, some of that really resonated because my father's side of the family is from Malaysia. So some of those lines it just really reminded me of that side of my family. I guess I would want to know if you feel, I mean, is there any part of writing as an Asian Canadian writer that still feels lonely? If it still feels like you're out on a limb by yourself somewhere, and is there a way to articulate what that loneliness consists of, if there is one? I know, like, we have a strong community and there is so much solidarity, but writing is also a lonely crap.
Yeah, I guess I would say that sometimes when I'm writing, I wonder how I struggle with how much I tend to translate and how much I go back and edit and say, I shouldn't have to translate. I shouldn't have to make it clear to our audience. Like, why can't we take it for granted that maybe they will look it up or maybe they'll somehow understand from the context? So in that sense, I feel lonely because I sometimes wonder if other people struggle with that too. And to what extent that, that hyphenated Asian Canadian, to what extent do I lean to that side or the other side? And I would be interested in hearing what you both think about that. And to what extent do you translate in your work too, or don't, or deliberately make that choice?
That's a great question. I think, I think it comes up in my work, and I remember trying to work this out with my editor. I ended up deciding, like, if there's a word that's repeated and it's like mom or dad, I'll just assume that because it's repeated enough, they'll get it. But certain things, like certain phrases, it was so funny because I thought, oh, it's clear from the context that word means idiot. But my editor was like, what's that word mean? What is it? And so then I tried translating it. So there's like paptong is a literally, the Korean translation into English would be like a rice container. But paptong, pap is rice and tong is the container. And you call someone that, it's like, you're like an empty rice container, you're stupid, right? And they never got that. So then I thought, do I try and call it like empty rice bucket? And I tried that, and that didn't work either. So then I went back to paptong and then putting beside it like stupid or something once, But yeah, I don't know, Madeleine, if you've had to come across that a lot.
I think at the beginning I had a really hard time, and I think there's almost no Asian words in the first book, maybe not very much in the second either. I think eventually I tried to figure out, was there a way to do it so sly that the English language reader doesn't even fumble over it, like that. It's like they suddenly understand, even it's like to almost trick them into understanding, or because I feel like a lot of us have grown up between multiple languages and are used to, I mean, for sure, my parents slipping into one language out of the other, mixing them all up, and that's the only way I can speak Cantonese, is to like jumble it with English. So I wondered that when I was writing Do Not Say We Have Nothing, is there a way to like make it so that actually it's English that suddenly is able to stretch in all these ways people didn't assume it could do it for them.
Yeah, I remember that about that book. And it reminds me a bit about something like Sylvia Lee in the States. There's that, the way she uses English, it feels like it's actually Chinese, and that's very cool. I think that's what I love about voice and what can be worked out in English. Interesting enough. I have a question for you, Madeleine, which is how I want to hear about your new novel that you're working on, and how could it be so vast and difficult? And this I guess every novel's new, but I'd love to hear what the challenges are or what you're working through.
I really wanted to write like a nice, tight, slender novel. But this one is growing, and it's partly because is it? And you're right. Who was working on something that's set in the near future?
I am. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So am I. So my new book goes way into the distant past and a bit into the future.
Nice.
I'm writing about the Pearl River Delta, or what's now Hong Kong, but through past and future. But I'm also
Amazing.
I'm also trying to make a building that's made of time. So down this one quarter, there are many different times that are totally interacting at every moment without
Wow.
where it feels natural to them. But yeah, what I really want to write about is intellectual traditions and how they get passed down to us, even when we aren't supposed to be the inheritors of them. Like
Oh, wow.
other times, and do we have a right to inherit them? And what
Wow.
happens if they become part of our lived reality? That kind of thing. It's so many things.
Yes.
Wow.
That's great. Sounds amazing.
Of the speculative fiction, because reading the rest of Lie's book, The Tiger Flew, was amazing, and the even just the way she used words, because she's an incredible poet, makes it interesting. But I want to get to Jamie before we run out of time. So please, Jamie, what question do you have to Anne and Maddie?
Well, I'm honored to be here with such experience and such, storied authors. And I just wanted to ask, for someone like me who's embarking on my debut, do you have any advice when your book comes out? What should I don't know, like, this is the first time I'm doing it. What do you say to an author that's embarking on this journey? Words of wisdom.
Madeleine, you go first. You go first.
Okay. It's gonna sound so silly, but I just think enjoy it as much as you possibly can. It's well, for starters, that reading was phenomenal. That was an incredible reading, and like your
Thank you.
dialogue, and for like getting all those voices sort of interacting, and how they were so vivid to us. That was brilliant, and it's a really remarkable thing to put a book in the world. And there's a lot of anxiety that comes with it, and a lot of vulnerability, and a lot of like feeling exposed. I think that for me, that's painful, difficult thing, because I'm just a very shy person. But it's also like there's a pure happiness that comes to you, because you made this thing, and there's a tangible, concrete existence of those people in the minds of others. It's an astonishing thing.
Thank you so much.
I could maybe give you some practical tips, I suppose.
That would be awesome.
Because I put out books of poetry, but this is my first novel, and post-COVID, like the marketing of books has changed quite a bit, and so I learned quite a bit afterwards. Too late, but that you should be promoting your book. I think at least 4 months before it comes out. I thought like a month before would be fine, but you should be doing it at least 4 months before, on social media and such. I'm not sure what you think about social media.
I have mixed feelings, but
yeah.
Yeah.
There are a lot of book clubs and things connecting on Instagram, and so yeah, it's great to get yourself out there early, much earlier than you think.
Okay, that's actually something I had not thought of, so that's very helpful.
I didn't think of it either. Yeah, I went afterwards. You don't need to though, man.
Yeah.
The world's waiting for your next book.
Exactly.
Listen to them,
Yes, so Jamie, I will tell Alan Cho to tell, because one of our board members, Ada Khan, has a book club here in Vancouver, Asian Can Book Club, and during COVID, they've been taking people on Zoom. So they're looking at how are they going to continue? Do they just continue having lunch in person and talking about the books, or will they continue with Zoom? Maybe we might have to spin off a Zoom book club. That might be good.
That would be nice.
And we're finding people from Saskatchewan, from Nova Scotia, all across Canada coming in, and from the United States as well. I think it's something that sometimes we don't have in our own communities, but we can find like-minded people. So that sounds great. Wonderful ideas and questions. So I want to see if there's a question from the audience, because please, you're welcome. We've been sharing lots of stories and having a great time. And I want to hear if there are some questions, but unfortunately, because I'm on an iPhone, I can't always see it. So maybe, who wants to take it? Anne, if you see a question pop up, can you moderate that for us?
Sure. Yep. I don't see a question yet, but I do have a question for Jamie. Have you walked away from your law career?
No. I like a lot of writers, I can't make a living writing, I don't think. And so my academic gig is my full-time gig, but I do try to make time to write, and I wish I had more time to write. And maybe one day it will work out that way. But for now, I'm trying to be grounded and realistic. And but to be honest, I also am, I enjoy that other part of my life as well. And just even your book, resonates a lot with a lot of the research I do on refugee law. And so there, like you, a lot of my writing in this particular book came from research I was doing, and thinking of things that I couldn't put in writing that I was doing in my other job, but wanted to express somewhere else, and I needed a vehicle for that. So I really resonated with your comments about how the research drove the fiction, and it's kind of funny how life kind of leads you into creative facets to release the kinds of things that you want to share.
Cool. There is a question that came up. What Asian Canadian authors are you reading now?
What am I reading now?
A few months ago, read Pick Shin Fong's Ghost Forest, which is wonderful. Actually, it feels like it's going to have a lot of parallels with Jamie's book. But Jamie, that's the next book.
I'm gonna read.
Yeah, and Anne's book is incredible, and it's lots of good things out right now.
I've been reading Tiping Chen's book. She's Asian American, but Land of Big Numbers.
I forgot the name of the book, but I just looked it up. It's called Days of Distraction. So I'm reading this book by Alexandra Chang, and it's about someone working in the IT field and trying to find her way. And it's interesting because she's dating, and about her dating life too. So it's interesting.
That's cool.
Oh, that sounds really neat, because as I said, I'm reading Anne's new novel, The Last Exiles. And when I was on Yahoo, all of a sudden it popped up, this older story from earlier in the year, and it was about Anne's, your newest documentary about artificial intelligence, and how you were wondering if you created a clone of your father a few years ago, would he be able to tell stories? And it sounds like a wonderful science fiction novel.
Oh, well, it's not going to be a novel, but that research into the futuristic stuff has kind of affected why I'm, in the near future with this new novel. But it's going to travel through time too, Madeleine. But it's more centered on a couple. But yeah, it goes within their lifetime in the early years, and then in the years ahead. And I can tell more about it when more of it's written. But Wendy has a question. How do your families respond to your writing? How do your families respond? I could say, like, my family was happy that I was writing about Korean culture. North Korea is different from South Korea, but a lot of the family dynamics and that kind of the hardship and the suffering that they went through in the late 60s and 70s is very similar to what North Koreans have lived through as well. So they were glad to see that part of the story told.
For me, I'm lucky to have a very artistic sister. She did the cover of my novel, which you can see behind me. So I think she enjoyed it. She told me that that she enjoyed it. I haven't had too many other than my close family read it. So my dad did have a funny reaction. He's like, well, you don't want to talk too political about things and get yourself in trouble. And I said, Dad, you realize I'm an immigration lawyer, right? And so it's kind of funny how his first thought was like, don't rock the boat too much. You don't want to piss off anybody. And I'm like, I'm not pissing off anybody. It's fiction, Dad. So it's kind of funny, that kind of old worry that he has. But in general, I've been very lucky to have very supportive family and who enjoy the work.
Madeleine?
Me too. I mean, I think it was hard for them. They really wanted me to go into law. My dad always had a hard time reading my work, but the one he really loved was Do Not Say We Have Nothing. And my dad's not a reader, so
I love it. I'm too.
An incredible thing for him to read 500 pages. And I used to love listening to him talk about the characters as if they were so real. And then he passed away about a year after the book came out. And my mom passed away also, but she was alive when Simple Recipes was published. But it's so Asian, I think. Her dining table was unsteady, so she was actually using Simple Recipes to hold up one of the legs. So funny.
Oh.
While I was eating dinner one day, and I was like, "You put my book under your table." She's like, "Nice."
That's so funny.
Oh, that's funny.
It's beautiful too. Communal tables.
There's a couple more questions. One was, do you have any advice for new writers? And then the other was, how do you feel about having your books in ebook and audiobook form? How do you handle personal signings of, etc., of digital forms? So, advice for new writers or ebook and audiobook forms? What do you feel about that?
Yes, I'm going to interrupt it a little bit, but if you can say something very quickly, because we're going to close up very soon and we might not be able to hang on. But authors, thank you very, very much for being here. And please stay on a little bit. We can chat in the back workroom. And congratulations, really, to all the new winners and sub-winners and second winners. And you're all here. And you, Jamie, Anne, and Madeleine, you are such great winners. So we're going to have to close up. I'm sorry.
Thank you so much.
Answer it on the chat. Okay, we can answer on the chat.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great.
And thank you, Word Vancouver, for everybody and everything that you're doing in the tech. And please check everything else on Word Vancouver, because there's supposed to be a special word that you can collect and win a prize.
Yeah, thank you so much, Word Vancouver, and thank you, ACWW. This has been so amazing. It's been a wonderful experience.
Thank you so much.
We'll see you soon in person.